What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Greater Human Performance Podcast, where we discuss nutrition, strength training, and self-improvement. Today's podcast is going to be a little bit different because it was inspired by a conversation that I had with one of my clients, which, by the way, if you'd like to work with me, click the link down below. So the conversation was regarding the amount of training, the amount of volume and intensity that someone should be doing in order to actually build muscle, build strength, and progress. And so this individual was in the mindset or belief that the more volume that they were doing, the more progress they were making. This individual had been training with the more volume approach for quite some time. So it only made sense that to be able to continue to progress, you have to do more. And for those of us that are familiar with the theory of progressive overload, where you're essentially doing more work over time, so whether that's adding more reps, more sets, or just adding more intensity or weight to the bar or dumbbell or whatever machine you're using, that was helping you progressively overload. However, the big problem with trying to do more every single day, every single week, every single month is that eventually you're going to hit a threshold to where you're going to get diminishing returns. So if you're doing too much volume and you're not recovering from that amount of volume, you're not going to continue to progress. And one of the big things that a lot of people seem to miss is that it doesn't matter how much volume you're doing. What matters is how much volume you can actually recover from. Because if you're not recovering from the amount of stimulus or volume that you're doing in training, you're not going to build muscle. You're not going to adequately recover and be able to push yourself again the next day, the next week, the next month. And everyone has a different set point. If you dive into the literature as far as what is the maximum recoverable volume, or MRV, someone might have, it's going to range depending on their level of ability, their training history, whether they're a male or female, how much lean body mass they have. So there are a lot of metrics that will determine or can at least guide you in the right direction as far as how many actual hard sets of certain movements or exercises should you be doing, because there is a spectrum of where you can be in order to progress or potentially not progress. The big picture here is that this individual was accustomed to pushing 15 plus sets per muscle group per week. However, now that they're doing a fraction of that, they are concerned that perhaps they're not progressing as much as they previously were. But when we turned the page and we saw that, hey, you were just not recovering back then. You were doing so much work in beating up your body and not eating enough that you weren't even progressing. You weren't building muscle. You were actually on the decline. You weren't able to add as much weight or any weight to the bar or to the dumbbells. You weren't able to progressively overload. And that is the big distinction that a lot of people unfortunately struggle with. So one of the best things that we did for my client is that we actually scaled back the total sets that they were doing per muscle group per week, and we actually allowed their body to recover. So now that they're doing less total work and eating sufficiently based on their actual calorie expenditure or their training intensity, their body's actually recovering. And so now that they're not feeling super beat up physically and mentally, now we can actually look to increasing the volume from a scalable standpoint, because you don't want to just double your volume. If you're doing 5 sets of a muscle group per week, you don't want to just go straight into 10 sets. So if you're doing 5 sets per week, you can add 1 set every week or every 2 weeks, and that is going to allow you to scale the volume up in a nice and consistent and sustainable way to where you're not going to feel super beat up. So to tie this all back together, if you find that you're super beat up, if you find that you're super tired throughout the day, that you're under recovered, that you're not sleeping well, and perhaps you realize that you're not able to progressively overload, like you start failing weights that you were doing 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, or you're just not able to do the same amount of reps in a given set at the same weight, there is a high probability that you're not recovering sufficiently. If that is the case, consider scaling back your total volume. So drop the sets down by maybe 25 to 50%, increase your intake or make sure that you're eating enough, and prioritize sleep for at least 2 to 4 weeks before you consider increasing the volume again. That should give you enough time to improve recovery and increase the volume and improve performance. So if you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one.